sunshine. I realize I am in sunshine. The skies are turning blue.
I didn't know you taught this. I want to follow that evolutionary medicine class just because this is another area I think where sometimes we see friction. Is why? So let me state it this way. Why do we want medical doctors to practice evidence-based medicine instead of taking advice from my grandma's sister's aunts who took care of this dog, and they said that they took this one pill or this one smelling salt and they were cured. So you know where I'm going with this. So why is that important? Why are you trying to train doctors to kind of have that point of view?
Well, so you're asking two questions really. Like one of them is why should our physicians accept evidence-based medicine? And then the second one is sort of like, why is an understanding of evolution fundamental to understanding medicine?
So answer those.
Right?
Answer both of those for me.
So there's two questions. And the first one is to get them on board with evidence-based medicine is really just getting on board with the idea that science is a way of knowing things, right?
Okay, so this comes back to what we've been talking
It just
about.
comes back to like, okay, we can demonstrate this, right? That this is demonstrated, we accept it with joy.
But what happens
right?
when one doctor says one thing and another? Like, do doctors ever contradict themselves?
Yeah, doctors do contradict themselves,
Or contradict each other?
But hopefully not like intentionally. Hopefully it's not because they're have other motives, right? Assuming that both physicians really care about their patients and really care about the outcomes. They can be persuaded by different lines of evidence, right? Maybe one participated in a trial. Maybe one's read this new paper and the other one hadn't. Or maybe the other one's like, you know what? I read that new paper, but I'm going to wait until more papers come in, right? So that's healthy part of science, right? That does you and me arguing over a biology. Should not surprise us at all, right? In fact, that's the hallmark of healthy scientific discourse, right? Is that scientists might disagree on something, and then, all right, great, hypothesis, generate data, test it, and then push that boundary of ignorance back a little bit further, right? And keep pushing it back. And so the idea that, physicians, particularly research physicians, would disagree on some things, super healthy, right? And then, your personal care physician who's like in the trenches really trying to help people out, if they disagree on that, it's, well, one had read a paper that another hadn't. Or maybe one has a background in something and is bringing to that, to this particular case, like a little bit of a bias, right? It's like, well, I did my undergraduate research on this, like I know how this works. And even though the papers haven't caught up with that yet, I'm convinced that this is a real thing. And hopefully that is still based on evidence and not just like, he's, I tried this with my dog and it worked, so.
So it's okay to be skeptical as a patient, though, even with your doctor. Maybe that's a good thing, right? You should be like, now, why are we doing this?
I could give you personal examples of this. Like, I don't want to get too personal, but we had a situation in our family where the one physician was saying you should do this, and we went and saw another physician. They said you should do this. We had three physicians, three different groups of physicians that we spoke with, and each one sort of advocated for a different therapeutic approach, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a function of what they do. The surgeon wanted to operate, the radiologist wanted to do radiation, right? It's like each group, recommended one thing. And Marcy and I are both scientists, so we kind of did a deep dive, and we straight up asked, like, okay, show me the data, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you want your students saying in class, like, show me the data, right? It's like, show me the data. So, we read the papers, we had them show us the data, we had honest and frank conversations with them, and it was revealing. They would always acknowledge their ignorance, right? Their humility. I would just say they were humble. They would say, this is what I do, this is how we've been treating this, like these radiation doses is how we've been treating this for a certain period of time, and these are the outcomes. But this is what most of my patients that survive complain about, right? These are the side effects, and this is the frequency in which this treatment doesn't work, right? So they were very honest about that going into it. And then we just sort of had to make a decision. And I'll just say this straight up, the decision that we made, like 3 years later, it came out that that's now considered the standard of care,
Awesome.
right? So like now, if you go to your physicians, they'll say, oh, you should do this, right? Because it's really well established. But at the time, we were looking at primary research articles and looking at the data that was presented to us. And I would just say that like you could tell your friends how empowering that is, right? Because they might have, like, if they're just like, my doctor says this, I'm not going to think about it. Or I had 2 doctors that, their ideas conflicted. Like, oh, shoot, you should have taken Heath's class, his biology class, because in his class, he teaches you how to identify whether or not results logically follow. Do the conclusions logically follow from the results? And you would have been empowered to make that decision yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
But most of your physicians are fantastic. They're up to speed. It's not that common that you're going to get.
Sure. But again, it's another good example of how we need to have, how do we know what we know?
Yeah.
And that we should be critical thinkers. It's not a bad thing to be a critical thinker, but then you've got to do sometimes that deep dive. You got to do the patience to do the work for that stuff. So last question then, if there's anything else that you want to talk about, I'm happy to open it up to you. But so why do I want my physician to accept evolution?
So here's why you want your physician to have a full understanding, a really good understanding of evolution. And I could talk about this for hours, Heath. But first of all, evolution happens, and it has significant implications for your health, right? And so if I was your physician, right, and you came to me and I diagnosed you with tuberculosis, and I'd say, well, here's how I'm going to treat you. Do you believe in evolution or not? Because if you don't believe in evolution, I'll just give you the antibiotic that they gave you 20 years ago, right? But since that time, tuberculosis has evolved resistance to that antibiotic. So, do you believe in evolution or not? Because if you do, then I'll give you this new one that will probably be more effective, right? Right. So diseases evolve and change over time, and if your physicians don't understand that, then they're not going to be very effective in prescribing adequate treatments. But here's the more important reason, and that is that the bodies that we have are the product of evolution, right? So every susceptibility that you have to a disease, every proclivity that you have to a problem with your mental or physical health is rooted in, has an evolutionary origin to that can be identified. And then, so if you understand the ultimate cause, right, the evolutionary cause for that, then that empowers your ability to arrive at what the proximate cause of that disease is and how to best treat it, right? So the classic example of that is like, well, what causes fever? Oh, well, you inject, something into your body that elicits this febrile response, a fever response. It sends a signal to the hypothalamus, right? And you end up, so that's a proximate cause, right? That's sort of physiology. But the ultimate cause is like, wait, why do you get a fever in the first place? Like why would our bodies have evolved that in the first place? Oh, well, maybe it has something to do with our immune response to fighting off pathogens. Oh, well, if that's how it originated, let's spend some time figuring that out, right? And then we can understand a lot more about whether or not we should treat that or how we treat it, right? Awesome. So just fundamental, everything from like how we treat knee injuries to how we treat mental health issues, right? All of that, no, I shouldn't say all of it, so much of that is rooted in, the legacy that we share with jumping out of the trees and getting onto the savannah and becoming upright, and all that kind of stuff, So your physician, when they really understand how this body and how this brain came to be, right, that's so powerful in allowing them to see a clearer picture of how to diagnose and treat the diseases that we get.
That's awesome. I love that. Byron, anything else that you would like to say to, I don't know who's going to watch this again, my audience is not huge, but there's some people that watch these. Is there any last thing that you'd like to say about reconciling science and religion, accepting truth with joy?
Yeah, I would just say that in general, that this is probably the most, like any of your listeners who are struggling with like, what's the meaning of life, right? I think that you can find it when you get at this intersection of faith and reason, right? If they're really willing to drill down and say, here's the space I've carved out for my spirituality, And here's the place I've carved out for reason. And then, you know, instead of like partitioning those and never letting them touch each other, like pretending like you just live two separate lives, rather than coming at it from that like schizophrenic angle, like pushing those two together, right? Like intentionally pushing those two fields, those two different ways of knowing together. And asking those questions. I would just say, like, an evolutionary understanding of how we got this body to, right, gives us insight into the purpose of life, like the meaning of life. Like, why did Heavenly Father send us here? Why did he put my spirit into this body, right? And you can come at it like, well, it was created perfectly in 24 hours and my spirit puts in it. And, or you could stop and pause and say, man, why does my back hurt? Why does my knee hurt? Like, why am I hardwired to be selfish and violent and aggressive? Like, right? Why does my body do one thing and then Jesus say, please don't do that, right? Well, if you stop and ponder that, right? It's like, yeah, that's kind of the purpose, right? That's the plan. You know, and I think that having an understanding of that, right? I think of understanding of the science then just provides so much more context for our spiritual meanings, right? Our spiritual purpose for being here. So, like, I would encourage anybody, you know, to try and take those two spaces and push them together a little bit. And you'll generate there'll be a little bit of heat, a little bit of smoke. But I think, you know, you can shine a big flashlight on yourself and who you are and how you roll when you do that.
I love that. Well, wow, it has been awesome listening to you. I could listen to you for hours. I wish you would have been my teacher.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's been great having Byron. I just got to show his view that he has here. I hope you guys can see this. Look at that. I mean, if you love Y Mountain, there you've got it right there. So,
yeah, I'm a really lucky guy.
Really lucky. So thank you for letting me be with you, and I really appreciate your time.
Sure, Heath. Happy to do it.
Sunshine with me. The doors are open, the skies are too. Sunshine is coming in for me and you. Sunshine.